In the previous session, we discussed about YAML. So in the YAML, what we will be writing it out. We will be discussing this part here. So in the YAML, when I will want to submit the request form, we need to send it in the specific format. So first of all, what kind of resource we want to create it. So suppose I want to create something called pod. We will discuss what is pod. But if I want to create something called pod, so the pod will come with the API version and all these things, correct? So if you go here and see the API resources, you will see certain sections are there where you can see the API version is there. Then you have the kind is there. So all these sections we need to define in the YAML. So most of the Kubernetes resource, not all of them, has the four major sections are there. First is API version, which API version you want to use it while creating it. API version depends on what kind of resource you want to create it. Suppose I want to create a pod. So the kind define which API version I want to use it. Suppose I want to create pod, then I should go and see what is the API version for the pod. So if we go here and see little bit down pod, and I'll see API version is V1. So pod has the API version V1. That is V1 is the API version for the pod. Okay. There is no V2, V3. It's a static thing. It's predefined. Okay. So API version is the static thing which is defined by Kubernetes API server. It's already defined definition is there. Kind type defined on the kind of resource I want to create it, API version will come. Then the name metadata section will come where you will be providing the resource type specific information such as what type of what name you want to give to the resource or which namespace you want to create it. So suppose I want to give some name to the resource, I can give there. And the spec section contains the specification about the resource, where exactly what image you want to use it, any specific resource related information. All this comes under specific section. So it means four sections are there: AKMS, API version, kind, metadata, and spec section that you will be defining in the YAML file. Depending on the kind of resource, the API version also will vary and the spec section also will be varying it out. Is it the four section are static? No, the four section spec section. Sometimes there is no spec section. It will be directly data, string data, and depending on the resource type, the four section will be varying it out. But major most of the resources in Kubernetes has the four section AKMS, where API version, kind, metadata, and spec section you will be defining in the YAML file, and then you will be submitting this YAML file to the API server. So this is about Kubernetes uh, YAML file definition. We will go and discuss each of the component in detail and see how we can use this four section and write our own YAML file. Thank you for joining this session.